On this week's Vaticano, Pope Francis leads the world in prayer for peace, and the Vatican also works diplomatically to promote a solution to the conflict in Syria. At his weekly general audience, the Pope speaks of the Church as a mother. Also, Pope Francis heads across downtown Rome to meet with some of the city's most needy, refugees. And we catch up with the Maltese Cardinal Prosper Grech, who speaks of the challenges that face medieval religious orders today. This Scotsman prepares for his coming ordination as Archbishop of St. Andrews and Edinburgh, Scotland. And we catch up with two types of pilgrims, those who have returned to Rome after Rio de Janeiro's World Youth Day, and these cyclists passing through the Eternal City on their way to Jerusalem. All this coming up.
We have come here to pray for the peace in the world, especially in Syria, and we want to unite with the Pope who gave this invitation to the whole world.
Thanks to Pope Francis, maybe there will be not war in Syria, and his voice is very powerful, and not only Christians but Muslims and Jewish people and also non-believers listen to his word.
Jesus is here. He wants us to be here. Maybe there are a lot of people that can't come physically at St. Peter's Square, but they are spiritually with us. So the Lord is here right now.
It's a time where the church comes together for a purpose. Suffering draws people together. And then now we have a crisis in the world with one of our brothers in the country of Syria. And so these crises are an opportunity for God to work a miracle.
On September the 7th, Pope Francis held a day of prayer and fasting for peace in the world. This was the scene in Rome as 100,000 people showed up in St. Peter's Square to join him for a rosary and Eucharistic adoration.
È possibile percorrere la strada della pace? Possiamo uscire da questa spirale di dolore e di morte?
Is it possible to walk the path of peace? Can we get out of this spiral of sorrow and death? Can we learn once again to walk and live in the ways of peace? Invoking the help of God under the maternal gaze of the Salus Populi Romani, the Queen of Peace, I say yes, it is possible for everyone.
Voglio rispondere. Sì, è possibile per tutti. Questa sera,
from every corner of the world tonight, I would like to hear us cry out, yes, it is possible for everyone. Or even better, I would like for each one of us, from the least to the greatest, including those called to govern nations, to respond, yes, we want it. My Christian faith urges me to look to the cross. How I wish that all men and women of goodwill would look to the cross, if only for a moment. There we can see God's reply. Violence is not answered with violence. Death is not answered with the language of death. In the silence of the cross, the uproar of weapons ceases, and the language of reconciliation, forgiveness, dialogue, and peace is spoken. This evening, I ask the Lord that we Christians, and our brothers and sisters of other religions, and every man and woman of goodwill, cry out forcefully, violence and war are never the way to peace.
La violenza e la guerra non è mai la via della pace.
The next day at his weekly Sunday Angelus in St. Peter's Square, he said that the only war that makes sense is that against evil.
Questa guerra contro il male comporta.
This war against evil means saying no to fratricidal hatred and to the lies that it uses, saying no to violence in all its forms, saying no to the proliferation of arms and their sale on the black market. There are so many of them. There are so many of them. And the doubt always remains. This war over there, this other war over there, Because there are wars everywhere, is it really a war over problems? Or is it a commercial war to sell those arms on the black market? These are the enemies we must fight, united and coherently, following no other interest but those of peace and the common good.
Uniti e con coerenza.
The Holy See is working behind the scenes to find a diplomatic solution to the conflict in Syria. In addition to Pope Francis' many appeals for peace and finding a political solution to the ongoing conflict, the Vatican has also reached out to foreign states diplomatically, as in this September the 5th encounter, to promote his position against continued violence.
Among
the general principles that must guide the search for a just solution to the conflict, I want to indicate the three most important. First, it is essential to restart dialogue among the sides involved and achieve the reconciliation of the entire Syrian people. Second, it is necessary to defend the unity of the nation, avoiding the creation of distinct areas for every part of society. And third, the territorial integrity of the nation must be guaranteed.
Cardinal Jean-Louis Tauran was once the head of the Vatican's relations with foreign states. For him, dialogue and reconciliation among religions are a sure way to peace.
The crisis of the Middle East is not caused by religions, but religions is part of the solution. When religions become politics, then the problem is there. When religion remains a spiritual option, it's all right. But when you mix politics and religion, then the problems.
The Holy See continues its diplomatic action, working to find a political solution to the Syrian conflict. As every Wednesday, St. Peter's Square filled up again this week with enthusiastic pilgrims there to spend a moment with Pope Francis. During his catechesis, he spoke of the mystery of the Church, our mother in the faith.
Queridos hermanos y hermanas,
Dear brothers and sisters, we take up our catechesis on the mystery of the Church again today, during this year of faith, with the image of the Mother. The Second Vatican Council says that the Church is our mother in the faith, in the supernatural life. Above all, the Church is mother because she gives birth to new Christians. By baptism, she makes them be born to divine life and establishes with them a vital interior link, like that between a mother and her children. Also, as a good mother, she helps them to believe and to be responsible. She feeds, educates, and takes care of them with tenderness throughout their lives. In this way, the Church proclaims the Word of God to us as light on the way, feeds us with the Eucharist, achieves for us divine forgiveness, and sustains us in the moments of suffering and difficulty. And finally, as we all form the Church, her maternity includes also the solicitude for each one of the others. All of us, pastors and faithful, are called to collaborate in the transmission of the faith, in the proclamation of the gospel, in tending to the needy, to make the Church fruitful. Let us ask ourselves, do I honor the Church as a mother? Do I participate in the sacraments and listen to the Word of God in community? And most of all, do I share her maternal care for my brothers?
sobre todo, comparto su cuidado maternal por mis hermanos.
The Pope said that it is up to the people of God to help the Church be the faithful spouse of Christ.
Do we love the Church like we love our own mother? Do we know how to understand her defects? All mothers have defects, all of us have defects. But when we speak of the defects of our mother, we understand them and we love them. The Church also has her defects. Do we help her to be ever more beautiful every day, more authentic, more what the Lord wants? I'll leave these questions with you. so you can think about them.
Queste domande vi lascio.
After a quick break, we'll be back to catch up with Pope Francis as he visits a center that welcomes refugees in Rome. Thanks for watching. This is Vaticano. On September the 10th, Pope Francis paid a special visit to this center for assistance called the Centro Astalli, right in the heart of Rome. Here, those who generally go unseen are in the majority. The Jesuit priest and lay volunteers that work here welcome and serve hundreds of them per day. They are refugees from all over the world. Making a statement and walking freely without a bodyguard, Pope Francis stopped in to speak to some of those eating in the Centro's hall.
La comprensione, la compassione nei confronti dei rifugiati.
The Pope's comprehension of and compassion for the refugees was an indelible sign that marked their lives and souls. It will accompany them and give them strength before the challenges they will have to face, which aren't few. It was really funny when one of the refugees greeted the Pope and asked forgiveness for his imperfect Italian. And the Pope responded, "Mine is imperfect either." The Pope also greeted with great affection all of the children present in the center, children of the refugees and all of the people with physical problems. And that wasn't it. He wanted to greet everyone, including the refugees who were standing in line outside the dining hall.
Anche a quelli che erano in fila fuori che aspettavano di mangiare.
After a prayer in the chapel, he spoke to around 500 people involved in the center's activities. There at the Church of Jesus, the one-time Roman Church of St. Ignatius of Loyola, he invited them to offer themselves for the most vulnerable with courage and generosity.
La sola accoglienza non basta.
Hospitality alone isn't enough. It's not enough to give a bun if it isn't accompanied by the possibility to learn to walk with their own legs. Charity that leaves the poor as they are isn't enough. True mercy, which God gives and teaches us, calls for justice, for the poor to find the way so that they are no longer poor.
There were also those who shared the drama of their escapes with the Pope. The experience for each is diverse and often quite harrowing.
Ha tenido tiempo de hablar con cada uno de nosotros. Hablamos y platicamos en un grupo como
He had time to speak to every single one of us. We chatted in a group as if we were all old friends. He really wanted to hear our stories. He looked at us, he listened to us, and we had time to joke. We joked a lot. He made us laugh a lot. He gave us hope, faith, and courage. And for me, as a Catholic, I had been preparing myself spiritually for this over the last 10 days. Today and throughout these days, I feel like I've really grown up in my faith and hope.
Ha crecido mi fe y la mi esperanza.
Meet to discuss their future, we caught up to their first cardinal in centuries, the 87-year-old Maltese national, Cardinal Prosper Grech. As his order works to find solutions to reverse a decline in vocations, he's pointing to cultural issues at the heart of things.
We don't have very much vocations in what we call the West. It's not only our problem. It's the problem of all the older religious orders. The difficulty with vows is the instability, very often, of modern young people who are afraid of life commitments, even in marriage itself. So they just live together, but many of them are just afraid to get married and sort of, take life appointments in a way.
Cardinal Grech and the Augustinians, though struggling to find their place in a changing world, have found favor in Pope Francis' pontificate. The Pope is a religious himself, being a Jesuit, and they've had the pleasure of his company several times over the last 6 months since his election. Most recently, it was for the feast of St. Augustine at the end of August.
It's a great honor that the Pope should be present on this occasion. It was the feast of St. Augustine. He is very devoted to St. Monica's. When he was a cardinal, he did visit St. Augustine's church and the tomb of St. Monica. So we thought, when we invited him, that he might like it, and in fact he did.
Cardinal Grech was already bending the Pope's ear from the day before his election to the papacy back in March. The Maltese gave the final meditation to the cardinals at the Sistine Chapel before the doors were closed for voting.
I tried to describe some of the problems of the Church. There were some problems, especially with journalists who were attacking the Curia, and then, of course, the question of pedophilia and other questions. So, well, I guess we've got to face reality, and however, I tried to accent that even that the Church has had worse storms than the present one. But the Church is not just a hierarchy, just not as a priest. It consists of the common people, and there are many poor, simple Catholics who really bring forward the mission of the Church. I met the Pope at the concelebration at St. Anna's a couple of days after his election, and he said, well, you gave us a very good talk, but just see what's come out of it, pointing to himself. So I said, well, we're not all infallible like you know, we do make mistakes, and he laughed at that anyway. So it's so there might have been some connection. I just don't know. God works in all ways.
The Vatican plates, the morning routine, the Catholic Church's diplomatic service will soon be left behind. Pope Francis has asked Monsignor Leo Cushley to move on from these storied halls of the Vatican's Secretariat of State to be the new Archbishop of St. Andrews in Edinburgh, Scotland.
Here we've got a map of the 1500s that was updated in the time of Gregory XIII, and you can see Britain and Ireland as they were at the very moment of the Reformation and just afterwards. Right where you see there's large capital A, that's the Kingdom of Fife, and then to the south of that, across the Firth of Forth, you have Edinburgh. So you have the two components, St. Andrews and Edinburgh.
When Pope Benedict XVI visited Scotland in 2010, Monsignor Cushley was a part of his entourage. He has served as the head of the English section of the Vatican State Department for 4 years now, also closely serving Pope Francis, cementing his relationship with the successors of St. Peter.
I will bring back with me a personal closeness and a personal affection for the person of the Pope, be it Pope John Paul, Pope Benedict, Pope Francis, but the Pope, whoever the Pope may be in a way. And that's something that's very important to us in the diplomatic service. It's something that is absolutely essential to the communion of the local churches with the Church of Rome.
Part of his job in recent years has been greeting foreign heads of state as they visit the Pope, which has also led to some personal encounters with Francis.
Just recently, I came down to do my job, and he called me in, and instead of me doing my job, he sat me down and we talked. For the first time, I perceived something about him, which was that here before me was a man with pastoral experience as the Archbishop of Buenos Aires, and he brings that with him. And as he talked to me about what I would face in Edinburgh, he was doing this with the heart of a man who had been there before me. And it was very touching, it was very moving, and it was very useful because he was a man of great pastoral experience on the ground.
Though he's leaving behind the Roman period of his life, it will never be far off.
We have natural links with Rome. Scotland's not very far away. We have one of the oldest pontifical colleges in the world here in Rome, the Pontifical Scots College, and I will be here regularly to follow our seminarians, to encourage vocations at home. But more importantly, perhaps, is the effective and affective link that you take away with you, and that every bishop ought to have, that connects him to the universal church and to Christ through the figure of the Pope.
Archbishop-elect Cushley will be ordained in Edinburgh's St. Mary's Cathedral on September the 21st. Stick around. After the break, we'll speak with two different types of pilgrims in Rome. Thanks for watching. This is Vaticano. It's been nearly 2 months now since Pope Francis was in Brazil for World Youth Day, but the memory is still fresh. For Estefania Aguirre, who covered the event for EWTN News, it was a wild ride.
It was my second World Youth Day, and it was really the first time that I could work as a journalist and combine my work with my faith. And I was alongside about 5,000 other journalists that traveled there. It was beautiful. There was a huge tent set up just for us on the south of Copacabana Beach. And it was just spectacular to work as a journalist through this experience and to cover these events, which is a really positive event. This really helps you also to grow as a Catholic because you realize that you're not alone, that there's 3 million young people with you. And yeah, it was really amazing.
Daniel Arasa manned the media center there with 23 of his students.
For us, in the first place, this work at the World Youth Day was a service to the Church directly. No? So we as a pontifical university want to serve the Church, and we serve the Church in the best way that we can do, which is with using our professional skills to do that. In that case, the communication skills. So first element, service to the Church. Secondly, it was really a great experience, human and spiritual experience for all of us, because being with more than 3.5 million youth from all over the world, listening to the Pope and the leader of the Church and the Vicar of Christ on earth is really touching for all of us. I would say that one of the most moving moments in the media center, it was the moment of the departure of the Pope. When the Pope was leaving, people feel really sorry about that. No? So the media center stopped for a while watching the images of the Pope getting into the plane. And even some people was waving to the images of the television, no? When, in fact, as if they were there on the airport. So that moment was very touching for all of us, realizing the importance of this trip, this first trip of an Latin American Pope in Brazil.
These and so many more are now preparing for the next World Youth Day in Krakow, Poland in 2016. For these cyclists, arriving in Rome is a major milestone on the road to Jerusalem.
It's a pilgrimage of 6 people originating from Belgium. The idea came from an Irish fellow from the Order of the Holy Sepulchre of Jerusalem, who did it for his 70th birthday. So I said to some of my colleagues, why can't you do the same? Because I myself don't drive a bike. And someone said yes, and then a second, and now there are 6.
We came from Brussels, departure on August 4th, then we were following the sea coast alongside la Côte d'Azur and then the Italian Riviera. Normally we are cycling about 80 kilometers a day.
The age varies between 65 and 72, so it's not evident to do 5,600 kilometers by bicycle. But what keeps them is the faith, is the prayers they have together. It brings them together, it keeps them together, and it gives them the force to go on. And I'm sure they will reach Jerusalem.
Voilà. At the beginning, we didn't know each other, but immediately we felt friends. The reason was the objective.
They do it for themselves, it's a pilgrimage, but they also raise money for the orphanage in Bethlehem, the famous crèche of Bethlehem, and we have already raised more than 70,000 euro by now.
I'd never do this for other reasons.